for me, it's always beautiful to come to places like this, so that it's an opportunity to think with, and listening the previous session and visiting the exhibition helped me to think a lot of things about sound and reception. And I asked if we could have one of the whistle vessels of Karen Urcia Arroyo, who has been part of the collaborative team for the exhibition. And these are vessels that are done by her, I understand, and they are alive. You can fill them with water and make them sound. And I think that is, well, I wish that the vessel was here with us, paying us company and giving us a guide on how to think the colonial aesthetics tonight. So I will also start with a quote by Karen Urcia Arroyo that is in the catalog of the exhibition. And because I think that will give us the key of what I would like to share with you today about the colonial aesthetics, listening, and the task of listening, and remembering. What does remembering means? So in the text that is a transcription that is here in the catalog, Karen says, let me see, I have not seen the whistling bodies for so many years, but I knew they were here and that they were waiting for me. Now I can talk to them and pass on something from them. For they are living beings, we are all living beings. So this, I think, she said, visiting the ethnographic museum, where the whistling bodies were waiting for her. And of course, this is a very big challenge for us as people from in the West, to understand how objects can be waiting for us, because we think that we are the human and the object is the object. And these objects, especially in ethnographic museums, but not only, go through a process of, I would say, of a deadening process, because they become uprooted. They become objects of classification and collection. And especially musical instruments that are meant to sound, that are meant to vibrate. And if we have time, I'll speak a little bit about vibration. When they enter the collection of the museum, they are silenced. Yeah? And this is one of the, for me, an image that I have used in some of my talks, that is going into the Ethnographic Museum of Paris, the Quai Branly, and seeing this big, they have a huge shaft that has a ramp around it for accessing the museum. And this shaft is is in a glass shaft and is full of musical instruments. They have thousands of instruments without nobody to play them, without their relations. So the instrument, without its relations, without its music, without the bodies that play it and those that listen, without the traditions that are remembered through them, the relations to earth, they are nothing. They are an empty shell, you know? And that is part of the violence of coloniality. So the appropriation of the material culture of other worlds in a way that the other worlds are left to die. Yeah? And this is something that concerns us in decolonial thought, is precisely addressing the violence of erasure, the violence of denigration, and how the big accumulation of wealth and collections in the global north has been constructed through this process of erasure and denigration, and this deadening process of objects. So Bettina was telling me in the morning that In German, they have this term in the museum, Entwesen. Yes, and it is the term of sterilizing the archaeological objects with arsenic. Apparently, at some time, they were doing that, and this term, I think, is saying a lot. And it is saying a lot about this emptying out the soul of an object. But the point is that we, as Westerns, we understand it as an object because we are in an ontology of separation. But the object is nothing without the relation. So it is about destroying the relation when the object is just classified. Yeah. So if you just reproduce an object for exhibition, you are not bringing it back to life. You are just reproducing it as an object of representation. Its life comes when it sounds, when it can work as an offering again, when it can invoke other realities, and when it can bring us into relation. Yeah? So it's the same. I use this example to explain the difference between an ontology of separation, that is the modern colonial, and an ontology of relationality. I use this example of, for example, when we eat food that is the food of, for example, we can go here in the north, go buy food in the supermarket, go buy a Mexican dish or a Chinese dish or a Thai dish, and it might have exactly the same ingredients than the dish that my grandma does in Mexico, for example. So chemically is the same object, which is not totally true, but let's say it's chemically the same. But one is empty because one doesn't have the relation. When I eat the food of my community or my grandmother, I am in relation. I am remembering. It's not about the object as a chemical entity. So it is the same, I think, with these musical instruments, that if they are deprived of their music and of their world of meaning, they are being killed. They are being emptied out. And so here, of course, I remember this wise words from Cecilia Vicuña when she came to Rotterdam, and she was speaking about plastic, and she said that the problem of plastic is not that it is dead, but the problem of plastic is that it cannot die. And for me, that is very key, because the fact of not being able to die is because you are detached from the relation, from the cycle of life. If there is no death, there is no life. If there is no ancestrality, there is no life. And that is a relationality of time where these worlds, the relational worlds, function. So without dying, there is no life. Because the death in this, like in the Moche culture, but the same in many other cultures from Abya Yala, from the whole of the Americas, the death are not the end of life and it's nothing. It's a place of nothingness. No, the death are seeds. They are the people we come from. So it is not an idea of transcendence, like an invention. The reference is remembering where we come from. We all come from some people before us, but we are made to forget. And we are made to live trapped in the empty present, like Walter Benjamin wrote in This Country many years ago. So here I want to refer to one of the other texts that is in the catalog, and is the text by Luis Mura Inoñan. And in this text, it's more an academic text, but he shows something very clear about what I'm saying, and he says sounds and sonority probably were also used in acts of invocation, presence and access to parallel realities of existence. Some moche whistles may have been intended to invoke the presence of a specific ancestral entities. So this act of invocation is a movement of relation to time that is almost forgotten, and especially in the contemporary, because the contemporary is about futurity, is about radical novelty, is about assemblages, is about messiness, and when we think of the word of invocation, the same as the word offering, these are movements in relation with a time that precedes us and that puts us in relation with those that sustain our life. Yeah, those humans, but also earth beings, and also the earth. Yeah, Mother Earth as that sustains our lives. Our life, we will not be alive without Mother Earth sustaining us physically. Yeah, it's not a mythology. It's not a belief. You can put your cells in a microscope and see that there is nothing in your cells that is not coming from the earth. And you find the minerals and the water, and it's all coming from the earth. So the earth is sustaining us, and it's not a mystical belief, It is a consciousness that we are not just self-made and we are not just projected towards the future, but that we come from somewhere and that we owe our existence to that relation. And so all these cultures are about the caring for these relations. And that's where invocation, where offering becomes so important. And in my work, I contrast a lot the movement of invocation and offering with the movements of capitalism, of consumption, for example. Yeah? So the logic of reception is not consumption. Yeah? The logic of invocation is not a performative assemblage, for example. Yeah? It has to do with a very humble position of remembering and acknowledging all those movements of life that constitute us, that weave of life that is sustaining us and binding us together. Furthermore, he says that some of these instruments, they were used for funeral ceremonies. They were placed in burial chambers. And the sound is those intimately connected with the ancestors, their fluids and their fertilizing capacities. So you see, the ancestors have the fertilizing capacities. The ancestors is not the end of life, it's the seed of life. It's the origin, like the seed is, if you want, a bone, but it's a bone that has a potential of developing life. So it is a reversal of the modern understanding of time that just goes towards a future and that thinks life is after, and what has happened is death as it's over, It's just empty. So in all these cultures that are memorial and relational, life comes from that memory. Everything that is alive comes from the fertility of that memory that is emerging. Yeah? So from there I want to connect to, let me see the time because then I begin talking too much and time passes by too fast. But I wanted to connect these quotes I was talking about very quickly to a quote in this famous book of Lenkersdorf about the tojolabales in Mexico, in Chiapas. And he's quoting he's quoting the words of Chepe, and he's saying something almost exactly as Karen Urcia Arroyo speaking about the whistling bodies. So in one point she says whistling bodies, which is, whistling is a verbality, is the verb of whistling, and is a body, is not an object. Yeah? And here Chepe says, listen, brother, everything has a heart. Everything lives. You see it because it moves. The flowers, the plants, the milpa have heart. That's why we need to visit them, we need to talk to them, and we need to wait for them to talk to us. Yeah? So this logic of reception and a very deep relationality with the world around us. And this is in contrast with, I think, a very strong critique here of capitalism or of the modern society, where, let me see, where is this quote? Yeah. Where also in the book of Denkers, he is quoting the sacred book of Chilam Balam, the Maya sacred book. And he says, in this book, there is this passage that Denkers is quoting here. So it's my own translation. The book is in Spanish, so I'm just translating. It's not a perfect translation, but how hard is serfdom, the serfdom that comes from Christianity or from the Christian world? You are seeing it. The word like the living word, la palabra, will be enslaved. The trees will be enslaved. The stones will be enslaved. Human beings will be enslaved when this world comes. So the enslavement of life is that will come with colonialism and then carry through coloniality. It's not just the enslavement of human beings, but it's precisely the fracture of that respect for life, for the mountain, the river, the water. And you see here in the plantation system that the West will establish in the colonies, for example, you see very clearly the enslavement of people and the enslavement of Mother Earth in order to produce the global commodity, the sugar, the coffee. And so it is in the thinking of Abya Yala, of the First Nations or indigenous people, as they call themselves, depending on the place, is a very clear thought that tells us that colonialism has come at the expense of life, and that this is a system of death for accumulation, for profit, for materiality. Yeah, so it is, and that's when Aníbal Quijano, who is one of the founding members of decolonial thinking, says there is no modernity without coloniality. There is no possible wealth in the global north without the massive extraction of life. And this massive extraction of life and enslavement was not only of human beings. It was the enslavement of the worlds of life, of the living worlds or the relational worlds. And I think Arturo Escobar summarizes it very beautifully. He says, globalization, speaking of the Western model of civilization, so globalization comes at the expense of relational worlds. So I will try to begin closing because I see the time. So decolonial aesthesis is a response to this because on the one hand we see that the power of coloniality was not just a power that came through the economy, like the capitalist economy, or the political processes of empire and exploitation and political subjugation, but that power also circulated through the control of the senses, the control of the experience of the world. Yeah, so the West will begin controlling the experience of the world and begin governing our senses. Yeah, the way we see, the way we taste, the way we touch, the way we hear will be molded according to the standards of Western aesthetics, And so we understand aesthetics not just as the problem of the beautiful and the sublime, like Kant and Baumgarten will develop here in Germany, but for us the problem of aesthetics is the problem, or is the struggle for the representation and the experience of the world, and the possibility of worlding the world. Yeah? Because colonialism, what it did is to suppress the possibility of relational worlds to continue being historical. When you enslave people, when you take the lands of people, when people are under genocide, they cannot be historical. Their ways of being in the world become suppressed, and they end up in ethnographic collections. Yeah? They are just objects of acquisition and of collecting the cultural heritage of others, or they just end up as part of the machinery of extraction of life for the production of global merchandise and profit. So decolonial aesthetics is a response that seeks to listen, to undo the silences and the erasures that modern colonial aesthetics produced, and to recover other ways of sensing and relating to the world that are there but are under suppression, under erasure, yeah? And that contain very important responses to possible ways of, for example, caring for Earth. The fact that the last resources in the planet are in indigenous or in First Nations lands is not a coincidence. It's not because they don't know how to exploit the Earth. It's because they know how to care for the Earth. Yeah? And so in this way, decolonial aesthetics is about that freedom of recovering the possibility of sensing and worlding worlds that have been under erasure. And that distinguishes very strongly with the movement of the contemporary, that is still within the Western paradigm of novelty, of seeking the radically new, what has never been done before, of assembling things. And so decolonial aesthetics is responding to the colonial wound. It is undoing erasures and silences. Of course, it will create original work, but its focus is not originality. It's not seeking novelty for novelty's sake. It's seeking justice. It's seeking the hope of being able to relate back, to redo the weaving that has been caught by the modern colonial system. I will close there for the moment. Thank you.